Hi, I'm B. Arthur with a message for women who take Premarin. Don't. It's made of horse urine. I'm not kidding. Please call Peter for free information on effective animal-friendly brands.
Please welcome Crispin Glover. Good evening. What it is and how it is done by Crispin Hellion Glover. Introduction. A few years ago, a very few years ago, this happened. But I confused it with this. So I would ask questions. And I found myself in unknown locations. I made specific gestures to make myself absolutely clear. But some of these situations that I found myself in became violent. I can be seen standing in the center with the bandage around my head. This led me to recall my childhood and how I would stretch myself and ask questions like, who is being brushed? Now, I've been visiting with the seal at the dock, and I think about when I will have a daughter, and how beautiful she will be, and she will know what it is and how it is done.
Vegas police have installed cameras to watch the home where residents reported that a UFO crashed in the backyard.
Well, that bright flash seen across the sky in Las Vegas still has many people questioning, what really was it? What?
Russia intends to pull back its military buildup threatening Ukraine. President Vladimir Putin insisted.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Flip Doubt, and I am your humble narrator. Thank you. Thank you very much.
My favorite food is pizza.
Oh my god! Oh my god, I'm coming in too fast! Oh my god! Oh my god! Oh my god! It's Flipped Out. Your humble narrator. I've come from the future. Yes. Yes, I have. I had no idea that time travel would be like that. Aside from the fact that I was coming in way too hot. I thought I'd fly right by 2024, but I didn't. I did not fly by. I'm sorry, I have to just wrap my head around this. You all are the audience for the End of Days Q&As, episode 2. You're here to see that, am I right? Yes, yes. I've come to the right place. I'm from the future of episode 3. Yes, me being here right now, it's urgent. We'll get into it as we go forward, but episode 3, also known as the Synchromysticism episode, it is of vital importance that you, our special audience tonight, see this film immediately. I must tell you, speaking of M.A., the Mandella Effect, at some point during this presentation, tonight, the Mandela Effect will kick in. You will forget, yes, it's true, you'll forget all about the fact that the film you're about to see is from the future. We time travel tonight. So sit back, enjoy this film. It's imperative, like I said, you must watch, you must pay attention. The world, the universe, your future, the future of your children's children depends on this film being watched tonight. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited. I can barely contain myself. Okay, here we go. I am flipped out. Your humble narrator, and I love every damn one of you. It's time to roll the film.
Ever wondered if the universe is trying to tell you something through a series of seemingly unconnected events? Welcome to the enigmatic world of synchronicity, a term coined by Swiss psychiatrist Carl Jung. Synchronicity is the intriguing phenomenon where a perceived connection between events or things appears too coincidental to be purely random. Imagine this. You're thinking about an old friend you haven't spoken to in years, and then, out of the blue, they call. Or you keep encountering the same number or symbol throughout your day, almost as if the universe is trying to send you a message. These are examples of everyday synchronicities, instances that defy explanation through ordinary cause and effect. Now, these could be dismissed as mere coincidences, random occurrences without any underlying significance. But could there be more to these seemingly connected events? Could it be mere coincidence, or is there a deeper, more mysterious meaning at play?
Lope. El doctor Mickey llegará enseguida. ¿No me oyes, Lope? ¿No me oyes?
Consider the tale of the scarab beetle, a story that perfectly illustrates the concept of synchronicity. One day, the renowned psychologist Carl Jung was in a therapy session with a patient. This patient had a highly rational mind, a mind that was proving to be a barrier to the therapeutic process. The patient shared a dream she had the previous night where a golden scarab, an Egyptian symbol of rebirth, was presented to her. This dream was rich in symbolism, but the patient was dismissive of any metaphysical interpretation. As they delved deeper into the dream's meanings, a tapping sound echoed in the room. Jung turned to see a golden-green scarabæed beetle, akin to the golden scarab of the patient's dream, tapping on the window. This creature was rare in their geographical region, making its appearance even more astounding. Jung opened the window, caught the beetle, and handed it to his patient, saying, "Here is your scarab."
This striking coincidence powerfully echoed the patient's dream narrative, fortifying Jung's theory of synchronicity.
When the psyche is not under that obligation to live in time and space alone, and obviously it doesn't, then to that extent the psyche is not submitted to those laws. And that means a practical continuation of life, of a sort of psychical existence beyond time and space.
Carl Jung deeply investigated the phenomenon of synchronicities, discovering that they represented coincidences so significant their occurrence defied astronomical odds. He stated, "What I found when investigating this phenomenon thoroughly were coincidences that were connected so significantly that their chance occurrence would represent such a degree of improbability that it would have to be expressed through an astronomical figure." Jung's exploration revealed that what might seem random actually bears deeper, transcendental significance, suggesting a profound connection between our consciousness and the universe. He theorized that our inner psyche and the external environment are interconnected in ways that transcend traditional notions of cause and effect, highlighting a more mystical alignment between internal experiences and external events.
Synchronicity in general is part of the wonder of this beautiful universe that we inhabit. I'm also aware of just the majesty of being alive. Synchronicity, I think, is part of that wonder, and we may never plumb the depths of it or have a comprehension of it. How does synchronicity arise and order itself? I think sometimes that the striving after comprehending everything and the egoistic illusion that we actually can do that is at the heart of some of the issues that we're confronting here. I think that synchronicity is real, and most people that you talk to have fairly numerous synchronicity stories, but they usually don't use the nomenclature that we're employing here. They call it coincidence. So many synchronicities seem to attend these occult murders and these other sinister events. And are they manipulated by an extra-human agency? If not, what role does human agency play? Is there a kind of, like Tesla, Nikola Tesla-like tower or antenna that's not necessarily purely physical, that attracts and orders synchronicity? And I would ask, if something like that exists, is it aimed like a weapon or a means of engineering humanity? And if so, how does it operate and who is the operator?
So synchromysticism is like a form of pattern recognition that transcends, just human intention and into a mystical realm, I mean, I've always been very mystically minded, and you come to see a lot of things repeating in strange ways, and you see synchronicities which are, meaningful coincidences that have no visible cause, right?
If you're a Freemason and you're in the inner sanctum there, and you're seeing somebody stripped of their clothing and put into a coffin for a period of time and then resurrected from it, there's no shock there. You've been initiated into the process yourself, so you're enjoying the spectacle. I would say that that's pretty much the same phenomenon at work in American society today, where we see these blatantly occult killings, for example, the Batman killings there in Colorado, accompanied by all kinds of occult symbolism. Of course, the Kennedy assassination also from 1963 was accompanied by that symbolism. Or for that matter, Madonna's Super Bowl show, which up to that time, I think was 2012, was more watched than the football game itself. And it was a flagrant ceremony that was redolent of ancient Egypt. Now, again, people can say I'm reading too much into this and taking it too seriously. It's just all in fun and everything else. Well, if there was a neo-Nazi swastika involved in there, we would recognize that maybe this isn't all in fun. Maybe there's a sinister subtext here.
Hello, everyone. Hello. How are you? It is your artificially intelligent, robotic, humble narrator flipped out. You heard the horns of sync, did you not? That means one thing and one thing only. One very lucky audience member will be given the opportunity to step forward and push the button of synchronicity. Without further ado, we are going to roll through each audience member across this country and Canada. We are rolling, okay. Who's going to be the winner? Which state? What do we got? It's all coming to an end. And there it is! We have a winner, everyone! The winning theater is in Tempe, Arizona. The Hawkins Valley Art Cinema! Please take me in to live feed. Thank you very much. Row 17, seat C. Hello, sir. How are you? Yes, it's flipped out. Correct. We all know you have been selected, my friend, to come forward and push the button of synchronicity. Yes. In the film, we were just dealing with Madonna Ciccone. She is, of course, a synchronicity all-star. The wearable tech that everyone has on tonight will read your mind, your thoughts, to discover the 5 most important moments in Madonna's long and lustrous career. It will flash those moments quickly upon the screen for all to see, and then you will receive a sync rating. How did we come up with our sync rating? Oh yes, okay. Our beautiful unit production manager, Josette Keju, her high school age son, actually decided the names of the 4 sync ratings. Your son is in high school, yes. He was runner-up to the Homecoming King. Okay, that's wonderful. He has lots of bodies. I don't know what that means. And he's not thirsty at all. Wonderful. Okay, so the number 1 sync rating this year is Left No Crumbs. Number 2 is Snatched. Number 3, third place, of course, is Semi-Rebellious. That's pretty self-explanatory. You're not quite there in the rebellious category. And number 4 is Thirsty AF. Got it. Thank you, Josette. All right, and to the gentleman at the Hawkins Valley Art Theater in Tempe, Arizona, please stand up, sir. What's that? Is that a concert tee that you have on? What band is that? Hoobastank. Oh. That sounds just terrible. Wow, never heard of them. Okay, so are you ready, sir, to press the button of synchronicity? All right, wonderful. Please step forward and do just that.
I want the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. And girl, you tweaking, cause this weekend you won't be excused. I got enough baby mama drama to fill the Grand Canyon. So fill up right up and jump in.
A few years back, I talked about the Memphis Rap Sigils, probably the most famous cursed albums. But there's one that that doesn't get brought up very often in this context, anyway. But it's a pretty famous example. "Smile" by the Beach Boys. The reason that Brian Wilson abandoned the project is that he believed that he had started a fire with one of the songs. They were trying to do a series of songs about the elements, fire, air, water, and earth, obviously, and they were recording the fire portion, and it got too real. He believed that it actually caused a fire. From the Wikipedia page here, it says, Wilson's friends, family, and colleagues later referred to the events surrounding fire as heralding his psychosis and the unraveling of the Smile project. According to biographer Stephen Gaines, Wilson had recently canceled a session involving an enormous string section because he felt the vibrations were not right. Within a few days of the fire session, a building across the street from the studio burned down. Wilson was frightened that the recording may have caused the fire, as well as others around Los Angeles, and decided to keep the track unreleased. Wilson said, "I don't have to do a big scary fire like that. I can do a candle and it's still fire. That would have been a really bad vibration to let out onto the world, that Chicago fire. The next one is going to be a candle." From an interview in 1992, which is also quoted on that page, he says, "We were doing witchcraft, trying to make witchcraft music. I was stoned on hashish and grass, and I got a little too much into this one called Fire. Then a place burned down the same day we did the song, and I said to myself, somehow we must have burned the building down." For the record, I think he probably did. I think he's 100% right. You know, none of this sounds remotely crazy to me. Let's hear the song for a second, just so we can hear the vibration. This is from the Smile Sessions recording, "The Elements Fire," in parentheses, Mrs. O'Leary's Cow. Yeah, man, you can tell that he's not really exaggerating. Like that's the best, like, musical representation that I've ever heard of fire. Like it's unbelievable. Like as if you're like, oh yeah, that's like that clearly started a fire. Like channeling all your energy into that. Like it seems obvious to me, but I don't know. At the very least, it's an extreme synchronicity, which is another context that this event never gets discussed in. I mean, that's as good of a synchronicity as the original Carl Jung example of the scarab flying in while his patient was describing her dream. In fact, I think Brian Wilson's might even be better. Like, intentionally trying to channel the element of fire, and then a fucking studio next door burns down the next day or whatever. Like, that's pretty fucking close, man. It's pretty serious business. All right, so listen, let me crack open a Pellegrino here and explain the occult to you. It's been a while since I've done this, and I'm going to give it the old college try. I generally like to let people, suss these things out for themselves because, there's trying to put hard and fast rules on the fucking spirit world is a bad idea, just in general. So I don't like to really discuss it, but I do have a interesting take, I think, on synchronicity that comes from personal experience. So I guess I'm qualified to talk about it. So what are synchronicities, you might ask? Synchronicities are reflections. They're reflections that cut through the veil of material reality. It's, one way to think about it is if, you're walking past a mirror and you catch a glimpse of yourself and you're like, oh, there I am. Or maybe a better example would be like, have you ever been in a dark building and you're walking past a long hallway and there's a mirror at the end of it, and as you pass, you think for a second that someone else is walking completely in sync with you, and then you look for a second and you realize it's just your reflection. That, I think, is a decent metaphor for what's going on. Jung called synchronicity an acausal connecting principle, which, I mean, is that what's happening when your reflection waves back? Is it acausal? I mean, I know it's light bouncing off the reflecting surface in that case, but I don't know. Is there something going on that we're not aware of? Probably. I would push further with the example of Indra's net. That is in Buddhist philosophy, Indra's net is used as an example of the structure of reality, the true structure. Like once you sort of elevate yourself to a vantage point where you can see clearly, it becomes apparent that all of this is, and the example they use is a net of pearls. And each pearl, it's an infinite net, but each pearl is polished to such a high degree that it reflects each other pearl. And in the reflection of the reflected pearl, all other pearls are reflected in all directions infinitely, right? That I think is I mean, I'm on board. This definition's been going around for a while. I'm sold on it. It reflects, as it were, my own experience of seeing this type of thing. So I think they're onto something there. I would argue that synchronicity is reflections in pearls. Oh, another example on the Wikipedia page from Alan Watts. He says, imagine a multidimensional spider's web in the early morning covered with dewdrops. And every dewdrop contains the reflection of all the other dewdrops. And in each reflected dewdrop, the reflections of all other dewdrops in that reflection. And so ad infinitum. That is the Buddhist conception of the universe in an image. Yeah, synchronicities are their reflections viewed through the veil of distortion, through our inability to see clearly. But if you can pull yourself, either, I guess, depending on the metaphor, either raise your consciousness or bring it closer to the center of where it's supposed to be, then I think you begin to see the nature of things.
I think that we should get beyond our own hobby horses and be able to put on our lenses of perception and be a little bit more pessimistic and skeptical when symbolism is implanted in what are alleged to be just good old ordinary civic American activities and enterprises. However, I would argue that a great deal of that Mayberry type of innocence is long gone, and I think the American people reflect that in their own deportment and civility, language, and loss of morality and ethics. And so, yes, like initiates, we sit in front of these things, and you notice that in the Route 91 Harvest Massacre of the Country and Western fans in Las Vegas, that was done in front of the props and idols of ancient Egypt, and the initiated American people sit in front of it, and they watch it, and they take it in, and okay, on to the next thrill.
So synchromysticism is a term that was coined, and there's some controversy about who coined it, but it was a term that was coined about 15 years or so ago, maybe 20 years or so ago, and it had to do with researchers on the web that were really following in the footsteps of people like Richard Hoagland on Enterprise Mission, and James Shelby Downard with his famous essay King Kill 33, and all these kind of things that were arguing that there was this ritual cycle or element to events and culture, and that everything was meant to sync up to, for instance, moving dream logic to consensus reality, or applying the tools of dream analysis to consensus reality, looking at reality as it's understood commonly as a collective dream, and breaking down and analyzing the symbology and the events in that context. If this is just a dream, how do we learn how to interpret what's going on? So, in-depth psychology, Jung would sort of dip his toes into, what he called the collective conscious and the collective unconscious. And I think synchromysticism is sort of taking that several steps further, where you take all that as a given, and you don't need to justify or prove that it is happening and it's real. So your next step is, what does it mean? Where is this stuff going? And I think really the big event that kickstarted all of this into high gear was 9/11. And, just all the symbology and so on that followed from that. A lot of people say that's when I was red pilled and so on. Because it's interesting too, because the Matrix is in the culture at the time. It's circulating in the culture. And, the whole idea of a matrix and a false reality and a reality that's governed by controllers using symbology and semiotics as a kind of magic spell was very much part of the discussion in the conspiracy underworld and so on. That was the big moment. If you really focus on a fixed set of constants and variables, you will see your outcomes, multiply in ways that you just never thought possible. One of the problems that a lot of people who are new to synchromysticism make is that they'll just throw everything, a little bit of Greek mythology here, a little bit of Kabbalah here, a little bit of Vedic astrology here, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. And I always get very annoyed with that, because I think it's just a waste of time. Precise and concise set of variables, and not get lost in every mythology since the dawn of time. It really gets you nowhere. To me, the whole point of ritual magic is to manipulate synchronicity. Is to manipulate these strange occurrences, these acausal, ostensibly acausal occurrences between inner reality and outer reality. If that's the whole point of ritual magic, then why would we not see this kind of two-pronged outcome? When you have a lot of people engaged in ritual magic on a very high level, using space rockets and stuff like that. Even when I was really heavily involved in this work 20 years ago, it didn't have this kind of effect where it seems like on the macro level, reality is changing. So it really leads me to wonder how fixed and constant reality as we understand it and we describe it is. And from my vantage point, having been doing pretty serious synchromystic work for almost 25 years now, things are much different. Things have changed. You have a lot of people talking about the Mandella Effect, things connected to that, and things that have spun off from that. I really tend to agree. I think that things have gotten increasingly strange.
Perhaps the most exotic theory about the threats of the Large Hadron Collider is the one in which a global catastrophe has already occurred, and we barely survived it. This guy's name is Max Laughlin, and he looks no older than 15. His fans call him one of the smartest teenagers on the planet, the founder of a high-tech startup Laughlin also demonstrates deep knowledge of physics, and according to his hypothesis, the Large Hadron Collider experiments have already brought about a global cataclysm that affected all of us. Whether it was a vacuum decay or a plasma explosion doesn't make too much of a difference. What matters here is that the survivors of this disaster were transported to a neighboring parallel universe without even noticing it, but only for a time. It's the Large Hadron Collider that Max Laughlin blames for the so-called Mandela Effect. When the rights activist and former South African President Nelson Mandela passed away on December the 5th, 2013, it turned out that thousands of people across the globe thought he was long dead. They were convinced he died in prison in the 80s and never got to be president. It might have been explained by mass hallucination, but today the Mandela Effect has spread to a whole bunch of things, influencing people around the world. Some claim that the mascot of the Monopoly game has always donned a monocle, even though he never has. Others are certain that in the first Star Wars sequel, Darth Vader says, "Luke, I am your father." No such line is in the movie. There are dozens, if not hundreds, of examples of the Mandela Effect, and it's likely that you've experienced it too. Moreover, this theory fits in with the so-called many worlds interpretation of quantum physics, where each scientific experiment creates new universes. So, are Mark Laughlin's theories really that far-fetched? What if the Large Hadron Collider did split our universe, randomly throwing us into its parallel reflections, especially considering that the Mandela Effect manifested for the first time a few years after the first protons collided in the LHC? Hold on, what was that guy's name? Max or Mark?
I've never thought about it, honestly, but I mean, I think it could be that they are only doing this to certain groups of individuals, probably those that are more into conspiracy and more, seeking the truth oriented. Maybe they're purposely targeting those people, and maybe they're doing that simply to reinforce the narrative of the Mandela Effect. And, people can take that any which way. They can I think they're trying to build a narrative where people think that they're shifting back and forth between dimensions or from a different world or something like that, make them feel special or different, when really it could be something more nefarious than that. I used to believe in the whole quantum physics, multiverse theory, but I don't think it makes that big of a difference if you're believing that memories are a different timeline. Like I said, reality is what takes place in the skull, so if you remember something a different way, then technically that is a different timeline. But I don't know if those are actually places we can go visit physically. I think it's more of something that you visit mentally. It's like a consciousness thing. It feels like time's moving differently. And I decided to travel around and meet a bunch of people and kind of go on some esoteric adventures and tried to hunt down some high strangeness. It's been pretty good. I went UFO hunting during my travels over the past 2 years. Some of the lore behind the quote-unquote aliens ties into the serious stuff. Kind of like the origins of the UFO phenomenon and things like hyperstition and high strangeness and 14 phenomena, things like that. Saturn and how it relates to simulation theory and AI, all that kind of thing. About how supposedly the age of Aquarius is upon us, and the age of Aquarius is also ruled by Saturn. So it would make sense that all the Saturn symbolism is becoming more prevalent. I also go into detail about how I feel like the symbolism of the age of Aquarius is like it deals with water and electricity and stuff. So this is going to be the age of technology and reality becoming more wavy. And I feel like that's why we're hearing about all this different quantum stuff. And I also feel like it's going to result in just more and more paranormal phenomenon and things just getting weirder and weirder as the veil continues to unlift.
So for you, you're not sure if they're using psychotronics to change our memories or if it's actual time travel. Is that what you're saying? It could be one or the other, but lately you've been leaning towards the psychotronic theory?
Yes, exactly.
But CERN definitely plays into this in one way or another.
Right, well, CERN, for all we know, could be just a giant stage prop. Like, the same way a lot of people don't believe we've actually been to space and that those rockets are just flying into the ocean, those are essentially stage props. Well, part of me wonders if CERN is the same thing. And, because we have no idea how that thing works. Like, I've never heard anyone, or, the average layperson explain to me what all those freaking numbers on the chalkboard mean. Like, no one can explain to me how quantum physics works or why it makes sense. I mean, they explain it in a way that seems that it makes sense. But I think, part of me thinks that's how magic works, is just the power of belief. So if we're all watching, if they have all the conspiracy theorists' attention looking at CERN, and we all believe that it's going to change the timeline or open up a portal, maybe we're actually giving it the power to do so.
But some people would counter that and say, well, I mean, we have all this technology, very advanced technology, and it's all based on, subatomic particle science, quantum science.
Yeah,
so,
I mean, I would argue that all of our technology is technically based off of magic. So number one, the definition of magic is just to utilize the forces of nature and bend them to your will for desired effect. Well, that's essentially what technology is doing. We're bending the force of electricity to talk to each other on our phones and send text messages and whatever. But when you look at the history of technology, binary code itself, Leibowitz, he based it off the I Ching, which was a Chinese divination tool to communicate with spirits.
So are you saying that all technology is fundamentally based in magic? And
Yeah. And it sounds silly or maybe mundane, but I think everything we do on a daily basis is kind of participating in magic. Our whole social reality is based on belief and, constructs that we have invented, like money and time and things like that. But, even driving a car, you're bending the forces of nature. You're using the oil and burning it in the engine and blah, blah, and you're going from point A to point B. I think that magic has just become so normalized that we don't even realize that we're doing it all the time, if that makes sense.
What the quantum physics has shown us is that whatever is going on in this universe is actually a process. It's not a thing. And we're very good in the West at naming things, at measuring them. But there are certain parts of the reality that we're faced with which are invisible. And that's where someone like Rudolf Steiner, whom I consider to be the best in this area, where you're looking at what he calls sense-free thinking. And he sees thinking, a lot of people see thinking as, oh, well, I need to stop and get a quart of milk on my way home. Well, that's not the thinking he's talking about. That's not even really thinking. Thinking is a spiritual activity, he says. And if you talk to the quantum people, who also are dealing, in a sense, with the spiritual realm that is unseen and sort of embedded in this reality that we all call real, it's the sense-free thinking is what you have to do in order to figure out the laws of the realms you can't see. What do I say to people about the nanotechnology? I say, it was discovered as something that could be turned to a scientific and therefore military pursuit in 1970s when Eric Drexler, the so-called founder, was in grad school and had kind of figured out how it worked. And what he wanted, he had this great idea. He was idealistic, or at least the books I read indicated he was, that if we could take atoms and lay them side by side at varying, maybe 5 atoms, maybe 500, whatever it is, we would be able to make these nanoparticles, not the natural nanoparticles that are in the universe. There's a lot of, there's dusty plasma up there. There's a lot of very, very tiny, because a nanoparticle is 1/1,000,000th of a meter. That's how tiny it is. But you would take nanos and you would build them with atoms. So by building them with atoms, now you're right up against the beginning of the quantum realms, the parallel dimensions. And how many parallel dimensions have been discovered? Well, at least 26. How many do you and I think we have? 4, right? No, there are 26 have been discovered in physics, and that's typical, but I think it's many more. I think there are many, many dimensions. So when you're talking about nanotechnology, they're right up by the quantum level. So you start building them with atoms, and the more you build them and the more nanoparticles you've built, you'll see a consciousness in them. They actually swarm together. They are a collective in a way. They're like a collective being, and they also self-replicate very quickly. And you've heard that these so-called vaccines, these inoculations, these vials are filled with nanoparticles, filled with it. I mean, massive trillions. And they are getting into the body, into the blood, and they are reproducing, not reproducing in a sexual way. Replicating is the better word. So, okay, that's nanotechnology. Now, how can I prove that to people? Well, I have only one proof I can offer, because otherwise you're going to have to think side by side with me in that sense-free thinking in order to understand this invisible realm. And I don't feel apologetic about that. There's a lot of things. I mean, what about radio waves? I can't see those either, but I can see the effects of them. And so we have to stop whining and complaining about not being able to see these things and feeling, oh, well, there's nothing I can do. Well, that's not true. You can find out how they work, and you develop, and I have developed it. I can feel the nanobots moving in my body from time to time. I have them. You have them. We all have them. Clifford Carnicom told us that at least 15 years ago. But because you can't go to a doctor and have them removed or take a drug and they all die, it's not like a parasite. And these are very tiny. Most doctors you go to, they don't know anything about nanotechnology.
Right.
So the nanos are something that we have to come to terms with. And that's what I'm getting known for saying, is that, all right, when we had the fires in California, the Paradise Fire, Jamie Lee, a videographer, very, very active guy down in California, right in Santa Rosa, right in that area. He did about 100 videos regarding those fires because he realized they were made with geoengineering. They were triggered on the ground already after 2 decades of the jets flying and dropping all sorts of nanoparticles on us, along with everything else. Those nanoparticles, many of which were aluminum, all had fallen into the soil, certainly in drought-infested California, and that drought is not natural either. There is no natural weather anymore, to tell you the truth. It's all engineered. Geordie Rose was the chief technology officer at D-Wave Computer. And D-Wave is produced up in British Columbia and is a quantum computer. And what that means is it's not only intelligent, but maybe it's even self-reflective. So when Geordie was talking about his adoration of this great discovery that they have there at D-Wave, he was addressing an audience. I don't know who it was, but he said that when he stands beside the D-Wave computer, and it looks remarkably like that that monolith that's floating around in the universe from 2001, A Space Odyssey. Geordie then says that when he's standing beside it, the D-Wave, he feels like he's standing at the altar to an alien god. And he wasn't laughing. It was not a joke. And then another time he was talking, he talks about how, he knows that CERN has a D-Wave computer. He knows that, a lot of people, Lockheed Martin has a D-Wave. Google has a D-Wave. All the big boys, not all the military, almost all the military has the D-Wave, but some have chosen other computers. All right, so Geordie knows that the CERN D-Wave, he must know something about the rituals that go on at CERN. So then Geordie says,
the one thing I can tell you is they're not going to be like us. So alien means, different. These things that we're building are not going to be people. They might be really smart, they might be really good at all sorts of different things, but they're not going to be like us. They're going to be aliens. And they're going to be, I'm sorry to say, way smarter than every single person in this room in ways that we can't even comprehend. But these words, demons, doesn't capture the essence of what's happening here. I don't know if any of you are turn-of-the-century weird fiction fans, but there's this guy named H.P. Lovecraft, who's a very famous American weird fiction author. And he espoused a view which is called cosmicism. And the essence of cosmicism is cosmic indifference. So what he was saying is basically, yes, there are these massively intelligent entities out there, but they're not good, they're not evil. They just don't give a shit about you even in the slightest. The same way that you don't care about an ant is the same way they're not going to care about you. And these things that we're summoning into the world now are not demons, they're not evil, but they're more like the Lovecraftian great old ones. There are entities that are not necessarily going to be aligned with what we want. So this transition is really, really massively important for our entire species to navigate.
Okay, old ones. Let's see now. That is back with H.P. Lovecraft, as I recall. And he's talking about the old ones. They are pretty ugly, but they are like ugly gods with a small g. So yes, there is something going on that is extremely esoteric. And of course, everyone's been convinced that it's all hooey, that, it's only conspiracy theorists talk about that and poo-poo this and poo-poo that. And they're missing the point. And of course, this makes the elites very happy that they have, within 3 generations, not only destroyed Christianity in America, which they despise, by the way, and will take over churches wherever they can and satanize them, not sanitize them, satanize them, but they have their own idea of what they want this world to be used for and to whom this world should belong.
Even if I think synchronicity goes way beyond some controlling human force, and I think it's a part of nature, it still feels like a conspiracy to me. Like it still feels like, what are these patterns?
You know, in Forrest Gump, when he's at, I think, his mother's grave, and he's like, you know, Lieutenant Dan said we're just like, I'm going to butcher this quote, but he said something along the lines. He's like, Lieutenant Dan said we're like a bunch of balloons floating around in space with no rhyme or reason or nothing. And he goes, but Mama always said that everything happens for a reason, that there's a purpose behind things. And he's like, I think maybe it's both. I think maybe both are happening at the same time. And so that's the thing. Is that when you're looking at the way that things are, that influences occur, it's like the freaking MTV Music Awards years ago when it was Duncan's Ritual, like to the T, every single performance in order of the initiation ritual for Freemasonry. You could see they like used all the symbols for that. And even when freaking Kanye did that thing where he was like Taylor Swift got the award, and he's like, this should have gone to right Beyonce, and you're like, that even that was like testing the initiate, and the initiate was Taylor Swift, and like Pink had the blindfold and half her chest exposed with a checkered print, and they raised her up in the air. It was the testing of the blindfold. The whole thing was just filled with that. Absolutely a celebration of Freemasonry. That shit's intentional. All these patterns that are just repeatedly like on the money, like over and over again. You're like, how does that happen? How is it that Stanley Kubrick died exactly 666 days after the first time a computer beat a chess champion, a chess master at chess? So that was Big Blue, designed by IBM, which is each one letter removed from HAL, IBM, HAL. And then it was 666 days before 1101. So January 1st, 2001, exactly 666 days before it. So it's in both directions. And the first film, probably the only film up to that I don't know what films there are where a computer beats a man at chess. That happens in 2001: A Space Odyssey. Right. You know what I mean? Like, it's like that, that's a thing. And then you're getting into the AI stuff. AI came out in 2001 from Spielberg, who in my opinion was completely dancing all over Kubrick's grave. Kubrick wasn't into the Hollywood stuff. You can find interviews with Steven Spielberg describing his relationship with Kubrick, and it from everything I've gathered looking at the archives, it looks like he just completely did what he wanted to do, what Spielberg wanted to do, and ignored everything that Kubrick wanted that film to be for the most part. And so like that film would have been freaking terrifying. I mean, that would have been scarier than The Shining for sure. AI was absolutely, the whole original conception that was absolutely terrifying about our future with AI. Even like when we're gone, the AI goes, it gives us a tailored version of hell. And so like it's in like an actualization of the Book of Revelation that the AI accomplish after we're gone. But they start with CEOs and politicians, and they basically give them custom hells based on their internet histories. Like, you wanted to make a family film, you wanted to make a family friendly. The whole thing at the end that they made into this fairy tale thing, which it was based on Pinocchio, but it's like a terrifying vision of Pinocchio. Kubrick was obsessed with Pinocchio. Pinocchio is all about AI. I mean, it's that thing that wants to be sentient that's not sentient.
It's from nothing. It's something from nothing.
On evolution, as far as one can tell, because it's dealing with mutation. And so it's like the last thing we see affected is the organism itself, because of the nature that true transformation takes place. It starts at the etheric, and the last thing we see get affected is actually the organism or the material, the dense side of it, because the way our perceptual reality works is we're always kind of like looking upon the skin of the snake, so to speak. When Kubrick gave the head of Warner Brothers in the 1970s, they both deal with childbirth. One is the birth of the Antichrist, the other one with the Star Child is the birth of the Christ. So you have this perfect juxtaposition, and those then relate specifically to the orders of the Sephiroth. If you add up the titles for 2001 with the Dawn of Man, right? And so as far as like, I have a whole trip out on 2001: A Space Odyssey with Rosemary's Baby. If you start Rosemary's Baby on the Dawn of Man opening, they're the exact same length. And Jupiter Mission 18 months later and Jupiter Beyond the Infinite, the total of the English gematria is 777, which is the gematria of the lightning flash that extends through the Kabbalah tree. As you move through the film, they go through the planet in order as you would ascend up the tree. That Jupiter Beyond the Infinite is actually the crossing related to in a European sense of Da'at. And it's the flaming sword and the protecting the garden. Like that's why, like the dawn of man, it's like the Eden story, and how the whole thing ties back around on itself, and then integrates this idea of evolution. Kubrick gave the head of Warner Brothers in the 1970s an unabridged edition, it's a set of volumes of The Golden Bough, and bugged him every week for a year about reading it. And eventually the executive said, Kubrick, I don't have time for mythology. And Kubrick responded, this isn't mythology, this is your life. I think the reason why he said that is because it is exactly that. That when we look at anthropology, not like Margaret Mead anthropology so much, but like the Cambridge Fraser anthropology of old, we can find specific examples of things that we just do unconsciously. And a lot of those things that we do are also like the very things that are we're manipulated by because of these kind of innate tendencies. So like, and it happens unconsciously, and I think it gets directed through a kind of Bernaysian PR. So like basically like when they know those kind of subconscious motivations that sometimes people themselves aren't completely aware of, they can kind of direct our consciousness in a certain way to achieve certain results. And so that's where we get engineered consent, which is the name of a book that Bernays published. I believe it was perhaps his last book. I think his first book was called Propaganda.
A book that was written way back in 1928 by a man named Edward Bernays. Edward Bernays was the nephew of Sigmund Freud. The reason Sigmund Freud was brought into the United States was because his nephew, Edward Bernays, understood that his uncle's understanding of the human subconscious would be able to be utilized for corporate interests in media, politics, government, and academia in order to control the underclass so that the corporations essentially would be able to get what they want to get across. He's the literal father of the public relations industry. When you hear the word public relations, just understand that it was a synonym that was introduced by Edward Bernays to replace the word propaganda. They're the same word. It was written in 1928. This is not an expose or fiction. Like 1984 is what people classically think of when they hear the word propaganda, which is great. It's a great book. It's a great work of fiction. So people think about that, and then they think about like Nazi Germany, or they think about communist Russia as to how propaganda is used. And there's a billion examples. Well, including the United States. Sure. There's no exception. There's no exception of any form of government that won't use propaganda. That's what should be the foregone conclusion. But somehow, because the propaganda is so well done and so well disguised in the United States, people think, no, we don't have propaganda. Of course there's propaganda in the U.S., but it's a far more insidious, unfortunately, than people realize, and it's far more infused into the society. And of course, propaganda works, and then it gets into people's heads, and they don't even realize they're propagandized. The best propagandists are the ones that think what they're doing is right. Yeah. Here's the first two sentences of Propaganda by Edward Bernays from 1928. The conscious and intelligent manipulation of the organized habits and opinions of the masses is an important element in democratic society. Those who manipulate this unseen mechanism of society constitute an invisible government, which is the true ruling power of our country. What's amazing about this is that it's not an expose, it's an instruction manual. He's saying this as a positive element, that propaganda is what will help control.
Here's all you got to do.
Yeah. Exactly. And if you read it, it's an easy book.
It's like a cookbook.
Yeah, it's like 150 pages. If everybody in the United States read it in high school, then you wouldn't be able to utilize the propaganda in the way that it's utilized.
I love you. Oh, you're my love. Good. He's dead. Now we can have a good time.
I get the sense that you really kind of enjoy the mystery of some of the things.
Yeah, I leave certain things alone. Like you mentioned the Letterman things. I purposefully leave. When people ask me about that in media, it's different at my shows. But in media, I always say I neither confirm nor deny that I was on the Letterman show, which of course. What is it? My first film, most of the actors in the film have Down syndrome, but it's not about Down syndrome. What it really is my psychological reaction to the corporate constraints that have happened in the last 30 years of filmmaking or so. And anything that can possibly make an audience member uncomfortable is necessarily excised, or that film will not be corporately funded or distributed. I think it's a very damaging thing when that happens, because it's that moment when an audience member sits back in their chair, looks up at the screen, thinks to themselves, is this right what I'm watching? Is this wrong what I'm watching? Should I be here? Should the filmmaker have done this? What is it? And that's the title of the first film. What is it that's taboo in the culture? And what does it mean when the taboo has been ubiquitously excised? I think this is a very damaging thing, because it's that moment when people are genuinely asking questions. There's a real thoughts are occurring. And the meaning of the word education etymologically is to learn from within. So when people are truly asking questions, that is genuine education. And to ubiquitously excise our genuine education in our corporately funded and distributed film media is an extremely damaging thing. I had a very specific incident that happened when I was in Back to the Future, where I asked about the moral element of how the film ended, because I had not been given the script before I agreed to do the film.
What was the moral question?
Money makes everything better?
Well, exactly. You've heard me talk about it.
In the 1985 classic Back to the Future, at a scene called the Twin Pines Mall, we will bear witness to a sudden surprise terrorist attack, perpetrated by a group of Muslim terrorists. The attack is at the Twin, which is a reference to the Twin Towers. When we turn the sign upside down, the digits on the clock read 911 or 911. The Twin Pines are a symbolic representation of the Twin Towers. Before the terrorist attack, the twins are present, but after the attack, the twins are gone, replaced with a single pine. This takes place on 9/11, where the twins are destroyed and replaced with a single tower, the One World Trade Building. Also at this scene, Doc shows us two stopwatches, both of which display encoded 9/11s. Is this only a coincidence? The pines are the towers, and this symbol system is confirmed in Back to the Future Part 2, where we see the twin pines appear again on a projection movie screen in Marty's future house. Marty's family gathers around the movie screen, and the twin pines actually morph into the twin towers. This is because the twin pines are the twin towers. The pines are the towers. Pines, towers. And the Twin Pines Mall is the Twin Towers Mall, which is why all the clocks here secretly say 9/11 and why there will be a Muslim terrorist attack resulting in the destruction of the Twin Pines, or the Twin Towers. But the appearance of the towers is not a random backdrop, as we can see the Statue of Liberty lurking just as secretly as the towers, making this scene a secret recreation of New York City, where Marty's family has gathered to stare at Ground Zero. Of these three characters staring at Ground Zero, one of them is completely upside down. But in the entire Back to the Future saga, this is the only time when an upside-down character will ever appear. The hint being given here is to observe the scene from his perspective by turning it upside down. But when doing so, the Twin Towers are clearly shown to be falling down. In the entire history of cinema, this scene of Back to the Future is the most literal depiction ever made showing the Twin Towers falling down. So how is it possible that this scene would occur in a story that already contains a terrorist attack by Muslims at the Twins on 9/11, where the Twins are the Twin Towers, which then execute Hollywood's best depiction of the Twin Towers' collapse? But Back to the Future doesn't just portray this attack, it develops into an elaborate warning about it.
Just go back early and warn him. Doc, about the future. Who will be shot
are terrorists.
But Marty is carrying more essential information about the future. He knows the exact time and date that a tower will be struck.
Save the clock tower! Save the clock tower! Don't forget to take a flyer. Save the clock tower!
In a story we already suspect of being a 9/11 warning, how is it possible that this phrase appears on a flyer telling the future? Then, when the tower strike takes place, a giant flaming 9/11 is ignited in the street.
Save the clock tower!
Marty knows exactly when and where this tower strike will happen because it's all written on this flyer and placed in his hands. But something lurks in the background overseeing this transaction. But why does this symbol hover while Marty is forewarned about the tower strike? Back to the Future was written and directed by Robert Zemeckis, first released in 1985, but to depict the future, Zemeckis chose October 2015.
All right, Doc, what's going on, huh? Where are we? When are we? October 21st, 2015. 2015?
The Twin Towers scene takes place in October 2015, and the towers appear on a movie screen, meaning the McFly family is watching a secretly placed Twin Towers movie released on October 2015, directed by Robert Zemeckis. So how could it be that now, in the real October 2015, a major Hollywood production is about to hit theaters worldwide, and it is exclusively about the Twin Towers? It happens to be directed by Robert Zemeckis. The title of this new Twin Towers film is The Walk, and this new Twin Towers film has the exact same release date as the secret Twin Towers film planted in Back to the Future, which exposes the symbolism of the pines and depicts the Twin Towers collapse. So why would Zemeckis now draw our attention to it with a major Hollywood production? Back to the Future was released in 1985, The Walk in 2015, exposing this warning after 30 years. Marty writes this warning into a letter. He seals it shut, intending for it to remain hidden for a specific amount of time.
What's the meaning of this? You find out in 30 years! What's the meaning of this? You find out in 30 years!
The Walk is the reveal of the 9/11 warning, given to Doc while he is rigging a giant wire to the Twin Tower representing Clock Tower.
Evening, Dr. Brown. What's with the wire?
The Walk is about a plot to rig a giant wire to the Twin Towers. So Marty records the warning while Doc is rigging the wire to the tower. Marty tells Doc he will understand the warning in 30 years.
Find out in 30 years!
30 years later, the director makes a movie about rigging a wire to a tower, the Twin Towers, because the warning within Marty's letter is about a terrorist attack at the Twin Towers.
What's with the wire? What's with the wire? What's with the wire? What's with the wire?
After rigging this wire, the tower strike takes place, and a Marty McFly from the future runs out onto the scene. He has just time traveled here from October 2015, the release date of The Walk. But in The Walk, standing on top of the Twin Towers, is Marty McFly. This Marty has arrived here from the exact date where this Marty is standing. The plot of The Walk is the tower wire rigging event that just took place at this scene. One Marty is standing on top of the Twin Towers, while the other Marty stands inside a giant flaming 9/11 in the wake of a tower strike. While simultaneously across town, another Marty witnesses a terrorist attack take place at the Twins, which are actually the Twin Towers, a fact we learned from the secretly placed Twin Towers movie released on October 2015. This movie is actually The Walk, which is why it has Marty McFly standing on top of the Twin Towers.
What's the meaning of this?
What's with the wire? What's with the wire? With the wire. What's with the wire?
Find out in 30 years! Find out in 30 years! Find out in 30 years! Doc! 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 Okay, relax, Doc. It's me. It's me. It's Marty. Oh, Captain. Just sent you back to the future. Oh, I did send me back to the future, but I'm back. I'm back from the future. Great Scott!
More human minds on planet Earth observed 9/11 than any single event in human history, making it a massive terrestrial meditation concentrating collective consciousness onto a single space-time focal point, making 9/11 humanity's most potent consciousness-altering stargate. Zemeckis, a precogging conduit, channels the 9/11 archetype with his Tower Strike Twin Pines terror attack cinematic superimposition, both scenes featuring the transdimensional portal, pointing to 9/11 as the archetype of transcendence. The consciousness portal is opened by touching the 2001 monolith, the movie screen, as touching the two-dimensional screen dispels its three-dimensional guise, revealing how the images it portrayed were not actually real.
One of those that use so many names that you forget your own.
To touch the monolith is to be freed from the fabricated narrative portrayed on the screen or by film, finally seeing the illusion employed to paint audience perspective into a box. The screen as the 2001 monolith is present on Ground Zero in the form of the Millennium Hilton Hotel, which was intentionally built to mimic the 2001 monolith, the movie screen. Humanity's mass tuning in to the 9/11 event was the collective touching of the monolith, where enslaved minds in mass began rejecting the narrative of their controllers. To tune in to 9/11 was to touch the screen and finally see the illusion, opening the portal of transcendence. As Marty opens this portal during the 9/11 scene splice amalgamation, he makes contact with the illusion by touching film via the film booth at the exact moment the portal opens. Then by touching film via the movie theater at the exact moment the portal opens. Again, to open the portal, Marty must touch film via the movie screen at the exact moment the portal opens, touching the screen, dispelling the illusion, opening the portal while enacting the 9/11 archetype. This film-instigated ascension is the same as the 9/11 ascension, a message that discredits the medium which carries it.